So hello everybody, hello all the lovely people out there. I'm Abby from Propagate.
And I'm Susan from Propagate.
Yeah, and I'm in a field in Dumfries and Galloway, in my truck.
And I'm in Moss Park, which is an old council estate in Glasgow.
Yeah. So in terms of our growing spaces, I run a small market garden called Hidden Veg, and I've got about a quarter to half an acre to grow on, a fairly large polytunnel, a decent amount of outdoor space, and I work with a sandy loam soil.
And I've got a decent sized garden because they're old houses, they're long, thin gardens. So the bottom half of my garden is pretty much all raised beds, or little low raised beds. And I've got some like fruit bushes and stuff as well, and trees. And I've also got an allotment, which I only got in February this year. So I've not had for very long, but I've got a good allotment too. And our soil, both at the allotment and here, is pretty heavy. And it remains wet, and the biggest challenge we have is apple slugs.
Yeah, which I don't really have a problem with the slugs because of my sandy soil, so it doesn't stay wet long. So that is so the idea of this this mini video. I don't know how long it's going to take actually. Is to fire our way through 10 or so questions that have come in over the last few weeks to Propagate. That we'll probably make videos, sort of more practical videos on as well, but we're just going to try and get through these 10 questions in as short a time as possible. So the first one was about slugs. So Susan, do you want to sort of give us an idea, read it out? What was the question?
Yeah, so it was just a general question about how to deal with pests, and in particular slugs and the different species of slugs that you get, because some slugs eat your vegetables and some more eat decomposing matter.
That's it.
But maybe should we talk about like what to do about slugs in the first place to start with, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, I guess as you just said, then not all slugs eat your vegetables, so it is important to remember that just because you're seeing a slug doesn't mean it's a bad slug. There's a high chance that it is a bad slug. But...
I'm not a fan of slugs. But snails I don't mind so much because you can pick them up by the shell and move them. But slugs are just a bit as well anyway, which doesn't help with the fact that then they slaughter your vegetable. But anyway, never mind.
So my community gardening in Glasgow over the last 13 years, I have spent a lot of time teaching people, showing people how to teach snails to fly.
What? Oh no!
That's why snails are so good, because you can basically throw them at walls. You teach them to fly.
Oh my god!
They give flight in the last moments of their lives.
Well, yeah, great sense of freedom for that few seconds.
I can fly. Sorry,
but
that is, I think, the best strategy for both slugs and snails is instant death.
Well, you see, I'm a bit of a namby-pamby, so what I do is I go into my back garden with 2 buckets, and I do this like almost every day, or sometimes a few times a day because I'm quite obsessive. And I go into the garden with my 2 buckets, and one bucket is to pick out weeds, so I pick out weeds as I go along, and the other bucket is to put slugs and snails into. And I do this particularly after it's rained, because obviously that's when the slugs and snails come out in the biggest numbers. And I put them in the bucket, and then I take them to the front garden and I dump them all on the front garden because I don't like actually killing them. But to be fair, though, I'm putting them out for the birds, so I am effectively killing them. I'm just not doing the dirty work.
Yeah. Do they not just kind of make their way back again, do you think?
Maybe. I probably should actually just kill them, but I don't know. This might be why I have a slug problem, because I'm too, I don't know. But anyway, that's what I've been doing. And I have to say, this year, because I've been doing it more consistently, I have had a lot less problem with slugs. But yeah, I don't know. I still have a problem with them though. But so I also every egg that I eat, I crack the egg, use it in whatever way, and then I crunch the eggshell and I put them all into I have a bowl out on my counter, and every egg goes in, and then after a few days when they're dry, crumple them a bit more, and then I put them down on the soil around the plants. And we do get through quite a lot of eggs, so like that, I actually have found that helps. Particularly around
because a lot of people find that doesn't really help at all.
No, you see, I think that has helped. But the other thing I tried, which a lot of people swear by, but I found didn't work, it was copper tape. Yeah. This year I put down copper tape, like individual rings of copper tape around like particular plants. I put it on the wooden edges of my mini kind of low raised beds, bloody everywhere. I literally was finding slugs under the copper tape. So I don't know. Yeah. So some people swear by that, I know, but I didn't find that work. But another thing I found that's quite good is, this was an idea of my mum's, and I was dubious to start with, but what she does, I mean, where she is, they have sandy soil, so they don't get much in the way of slugs anyway. But what she does is she puts out upside down saucers on the ground.
Yeah.
And then she goes out once a day and removes, and my mum also doesn't kill the slugs. You know, it's a family tradition. So she removes all the slugs from under the saucers and then puts them somewhere else. And I was a bit dubious because in a way I was like, well, is that not just encouraging them to hide there? Mm-hmm. But I have to say,
it's creating spaces for them to hide. So
exactly, exactly. And I have to say, what I tend to do is when it's wet, I hunt for the slugs between the plants, and when it's dry, I go and take them out from underneath the saucers, because that's where
they. You can do the same with half an orange. So if you an orange skin, so if you kind of you cut an orange in half and you scoop out the inside, and you put that upside down the soil, and they go into. And it is true. They want sort of dark, moist places to hide. So
I've not tried that, but I will at some point. Do you find that work?
Yeah, it does work. Yeah, because they quite like the citrus as well. So they kind of attract that.
Yeah.
It's the citrus.
And I think citrus, I've heard, detracts cats.
Well, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah. We have a lot of cats around here, and I don't have a cat, but they go into my lovely soft soil in the beds and try and poo in it, basically. Yeah. But I've been told that citrus repels cats. I now have nets around every single bed to stop the cats getting in. But that's
stop the cats.
Yeah, dig up all my seedlings and poo in it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So my experience with slugs, just to sort of go into that pretty quickly, is that when I was a little girl, my dad grew all the vegetables, and I helped him in the garden, learned to grow veg with him, and he used to sprinkle salt on the slugs. Directly onto them, and I remember it well. And I'm 42 now, and I was little. I was like about 5 or 6 years old then, and it was brutal, absolutely brutal, because it's like an acid attack. They dissolve in front of your very eyes, and I was still traumatized by this experience. And I can't go that far. I can't do that. I can't do the brutal thing that he used to do, but I probably still does do actually. And it took me a long time before I could kill slugs. But I remember as a particular volunteer in a community garden that I worked in for some years in Glasgow at Urban Root, as a particular volunteer who had absolutely no qualms whatsoever about just going squish, slug, squish, slug, squish, slug. So it's like, that's actually quite straightforward.
Well, you know what?
Especially when they're small slugs, and you can just kind of like
it's instantaneous death. Yeah. A mutual friend of ours, who I won't name on this, just in case she doesn't want this broadcast, but last person I would have imagined doing this, but she goes out with a knife and a torch and a knife at night, picks up slugs and cuts their heads off, and then throws them to the birds.
It works. So the other thing to do with slugs is to look for their eggs. It's really important to look for their eggs, isn't it? Because a lot of people don't realise that most slugs are actually under the soil. They're not on top of the soil. They live in the soil, and that's where they lay their eggs, in the soil. So if you've got raised beds, they're quite likely to sort of lay their eggs around the edges.
The wooden edges, I know. Yeah,
and that's where to kind of like dig away a little bit and look underneath things. And if you see a load of kind of white blobs clustered together like that, then that's slug eggs.
I have to admit, actually, I actually am planning in the longer term of removing the wood from my beds. Basically, I've been doing like no digs. I've been layering. They're only like 6 inches deep. They're not full blown ones. But I basically just use them to layer the soil. But the longer it's in place, the more it'll stay. And I'm actually just going to remove the wooden frames because
raised beds are great in the city, aren't they? Because
they handy, and it's an easy way. Yeah, it's a very easy way to do it, particularly if you want to do like no dig and build the compost up. But I think,
of course, in the city, if you're growing on if you've got concrete rather than
of course. It's pretty much essential to that. Yeah, but I'm not, so I can get away with removing them. I think now, to be honest, now the beds are a bit more sort of solid, you know.
And ultimately, it does create a space for slugs to hide and snails to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Should we move on to other pests?
Yeah, sure.
Let's
do that.
So butterflies and birds. We'll just cover some of these really quickly. Cabbage white is obviously, I don't know about up in Glasgow, but that's certainly down in Galloway. It's been a hell of a year for cabbage whites, and I have spent many years in the past, many seasons in the past, scraping little, again, instant death, taking caterpillars directly off the plant and pushing them in between my fingers. Again, it's easier when they're really small.
I know.
But, you know, prevention is always better than cure in this case.
We don't get as much in the way of butterflies. So I have to say, I tend to find like I have the odd brassica gets caterpillars. But if it's just like one or two, I do tend, or it's like one little patch, I tend to leave it. But if there were more, as there will be in Dumfries and Galloway, then I would do the same. But what I do have is I've just actually got this here is this netting.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if that's actually fine enough to keep butterflies off.
It's probably not actually, because the stuff that I've got is 5 mil. The whole
is it?
5
mil. Okay.
You've got a butterfly netting should be 5 mil. That's okay for birds, what you've got there.
Yeah.
And definitely in the city, I remember that pigeons were a particular problem.
Yeah. So strangely, I'd never really had a problem with birds eating my brassicas in the garden.
Okay.
And I've never actually really had that problem even in like community gardens and stuff that I've worked in. But I lovingly grew on a load of brassicas, different types, this year to put in my allotment. Like, so proud of them, beautiful seedlings. They were just right for putting out in the allotment. I put them all out. Luckily I put out half of them one day and I didn't get on to, didn't have time to do the whole rest. I went down the next day to do the next lot. They had been stripped of leaves overnight. I was like, oh!
My
God, I've never seen it to that extent. But I mean, obviously there must be pigeons there or something. But so I ended up, luckily though, they hadn't broken the stems off and they all had like a little bit of leaf left, a tiny bit. And I actually moved them all, put them under small, I have like actually some little netting tunnels that I had used for keeping cats off. So I took them down to the allotment and I moved them all under that. And actually they survived. They actually did survive, to my surprise, and they're growing really well. But if I had left them another day, I don't think they would have done.
That's it.
But I've actually got this is actually now to replace the little netting tunnels I've got over the brassicas because they're now too tall. So I'm just going to stick this over it.
Yeah. And that'll be fine for birds, but the hall's definitely too big for butterflies.
Yeah.
For there.
I've
kind of invested in kind of massive, big, wide lengths of kind of 5 mil mesh.
Yeah, that's maybe what she got. Hopefully, Have I missed the butterfly caterpillars this year?
You might get away with it. Yeah, it depends how the weather goes for the next couple of weeks. Really, there's been 2 flushes. You get the initial burst of butterfly quite early in the year, and then they kind of lay their eggs in different places. But the caterpillars hatch out and they form chrysalises, and then they metamorphosize into butterflies, and then you get the second flush, which we've just had here.
Okay.
So I thought it was like over, and I hadn't bothered netting one of my beds of brassicas, and then suddenly there's these bloody cabbage whites all over the place. It was like
Yeah.
Luckily, I had more netting, so it was okay.
Yeah, I think I'll risk it, but I think for next year I might have to get some fine netting just to be on the safe side. Yeah.
And the same goes for protecting your fruit bushes. So I guess your blackcurrant, gooseberries, blueberries. Well, blueberries are still harvesting just now, but blackcurrants and gooseberries we're done pretty much. But I've got quite a few red-currant bushes that literally have been stripped overnight.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah, I know. I've got a few strawberries left coming as well. So, but I haven't got a net over them, but I've got nets around them, and it's a very sort of narrow patch. So I don't think the birds fly into it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Quite good to make a cage. If you've got a big patch of fruit bushes, then build a big cage that you can.
My grandparents had a strawberry and raspberry. Well, it was raspberries mainly, a raspberry cage when I was a kid, and I loved it. It was a walk-in one. It was like several meters long and like a couple of meters wide. And I used to pretend it was like a tiger in a cage. I don't know why I wanted to be a tiger in a cage, but I thought it was quite fun. Yeah, I think I had a great garden. Yeah.
Right. I'm just aware that it is. We've spent 20 minutes talking about slugs, so
this is the slug episode. Okay, so yes,
let's move on. The time was basically all about seaweed, and this one's all about. Okay. Quick fire questions. That was the plan. Okay, so moving on, we had another question in about cover cropping and green manures. Yeah. So people want to know what they can sow at this time of year. For beds that are kind of suddenly becoming empty, what can they put in, and what crops can they get in, sort of quick crops in between other stuff. So I can start off. I mean, first of all, you can still sow fast things like radishes and turnips this time of year. Turnips will mature, radishes will mature within the space of about 6 weeks. For baby turnips, and they're really tasty. So you can get those in lots of different places. You could also, and we'll talk about this in a wee bit, I think. But yeah, there's loads of seeds that you can be sowing at this time of year. So things like fast salads, like Mizuna and rocket. Yeah. And loads of those will kind of like fit in your small gaps as well. Yeah. Those are all members of the brassica family, so it's quite important to remember that within your crop rotation kind of thing. And in terms of green manures, you had some really good ideas, didn't you, Susan?
Yeah, well, so this is actually not something I have much experience of, so I was looking it up. But basically, I found some recommendations for field beans, and I was quite excited because I actually grew some field beans this year, and I was like, oh, brilliant, I could stick in some more. But then I found out that you have to dig them in before they flower, because apparently once they flower, the nitrogen retention isn't as good. So, I mean, it would be good for the soil, but I suppose I quite like the idea of ones that you can also eat. So I was like quite keen on the mustards and things, because you could grow a bit and then dig some in, and the same with some of the winter salads, like grow it for some leaves and then digging other leaves in kind of thing. But what else did I have? Clover. And I thought clover was quite a nice idea, actually, because that's
great. I've had some bad experiences with clover.
Have you?
Well, only because it takes over. It's if it gets a hold in a bed, you just get like a whole load of clover in it.
Well,
you can always pull spaces apart in it, and you can make space amongst the clover.
Yeah.
My absolute favourite green manure is Phacelia. Absolutely love it. Oh, Phacelia. La, 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 la. So I haven't got a picture of it. I should have got a picture up. But yeah, Phacelia, she's a little fuzzy purple flower that bumblebees particularly absolutely love. Absolutely love them. So that attracts bumblebees, which is great for like pollinating other things as well. Yeah. Phacelia is a great mix, so you can put, I think a Phacelia and red clover mix is quite good.
Okay,
because what Phacelia does isn't so much as, it doesn't have high levels of nitrogen, potassium or phosphorus in itself, but what it does do is helps to fix the nutrients from other things.
Ah, that's really interesting.
So it stabilises.
Effectively, yeah.
It's a companion plant, and it stabilises nutrients, so it's really good to put in a mix. In a mix with other green manure crops, so you can put it in with field beans, put it in with your alfalfa, put it in with mustard or your red clover.
Yeah, I really like that idea, because I've been reading quite a lot recently about feeding the soil rather than feeding the plants. Do you know what I mean? And like the important this, obviously, but the soil is the important bit, isn't it? More important than the plant, really.
Yeah, you look after the soil, and the soil will look after the plants. And
exactly. Yeah,
it's so important to keep on kind of like adding in organic matter, to kind of enriching it with different types of manures, and whether they're green manures or animal manures or whatever you choose. green matter, brown matter, just keep on adding organic matter.
Basically imitating a natural environment, really.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to be a little bit careful you don't go too carbon heavy. So it's good for carbon sequestration, obviously, in the soil, because you want a good amount of soil carbon, but don't overuse wood chip, for example. Unless it's really well rotted, because the thing about having too much carbon in the soil is it inhibits the movement of nitrogen. And the nitrogen is really what plants need to uptake. So
I think
some people would advocate like mulching extensively with wood chip, and I would say, look, no, if you want to grow vegetables, don't do that.
That's interesting, because I've always been told by my mum, who is is a gardener, but I don't know whether she's got this from like reading books or whether she's got this from her parents or what, I don't know. But she always tells me like to be careful about having compost too close to the roots. You know what I mean? Because it sort of it can like be too rich for the plants, and it can sort of damage them a little bit. You know what I mean?
If it's quite fresh compost, yeah.
So that's it's
well
a little bit also like the difference between like well rotted wood chip and fresh wood chip. You know what I mean? And also, I suppose another good thing about like no dig, so you're not digging it in, you're putting it on the top. Do you know what I mean? So you're not actually disturbing the roots in the soil. But like anyway, so slightly off topic again, but where else are we up to?
So that was the cover crop in green manures. I think we've done that one. Yeah. Okay. So,
and then that sort of leads very much into the fast crops to grow at the end of the season, which is also very much to do with the cover crops, isn't it? So I just had at the moment I've got a load of mustards growing, which, as you said, are brassicas.
Show us.
So I've actually got a load of seed packets here that I can show you, because I keep my seeds in a very beautiful month by month arrangement, because I'm very meticulous about this, and then I get disorganized and I get stressed. So I've got red that's not going to show, is it? Does it show? Not really. Well, okay. It's red Mizuna, tatsoi, which is an oriental cabbage. So I find a lot of the oriental brassicas are particularly good for growing at the colder end of the year. I don't know why this is that oriental vegetables have been developed. Maybe it's to do with having been grown in colder climates where they originated, where the species originated. I'm not sure. But yeah, lots and lots of oriental brassicas like tatsoi, saitai, soy sim, Mizuna is another oriental one. And I find that some of the kind of seed companies that I look at have great, month by month growing guides on their websites. So it's really good, because you can just go and you just go and look at it and go, oh, what seeds do I need to order? There you go. You don't even need to look it up. Soy sim, there's quite a few. And what else you could be planting broad beans at the moment, couldn't you?
You could be planting broad beans, and pretty soon we're going into sort of garlic planting season, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah,
not quite.
But also, we were chatting just before we went live, weren't we, about polytunnels? But obviously you have a polytunnel and you're in your growing area, but I don't have room for a whole polytunnel. But last year, for the first time, I got a couple of mini polytunnels, which meant I grew salad all through the winter last year, which was amazing. It was the first time I'd done that. I'd had little individual cloche things for a few things before, but I'd never put a polytunnel over a bed. And they were great. They're just arches with plastic covering, clear plastic covering over them. But it was really interesting, because if you put your hand in them, you open it up and put your hand in, you could feel the warmth.
You've still got to be careful about the nighttime temperatures. So I'm going to be putting fleece tunnels inside my polytunnel.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Stop things from freezing. Most things are pretty hardy. Most salads that I'm going to be growing over winter are pretty hardy, and don't mind a little bit of frost anyway. But just those extra cold nights.
We didn't have a particularly cold winter last year, I suppose, so maybe that was why it was okay. But also, I suppose because they're so small, maybe because they're small and low to the ground, maybe they don't cool down as much. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what the physics of that would be, but
we've got a temperature probe on our polytunnels, so both indoors and outdoors. So we're able to monitor the changes in temperature, and it's amazing how much it does mirror outside.
Right. Okay.
just up by like
just up
a degree, or a bit, you know. So nighttime temperatures, yes, it's a little bit warmer, but it still does drop right down. So
okay, that's interesting. So maybe something to look at would be kind of more insulating layers. But yeah, no, I was really pleased with the little polytunnels last year, and it was great. And it's like winter salads, so lettuces like bred for planting and growing through the winter. Mustard.
And there's like Claytonia and landcress.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even lamb lettuce, like, you know, there are lots of different salad veg that is not lettuce, you know.
Yes. And they're all cut and come again, so they'll keep.
Exactly. So you sow it now, or maybe in September, and then it'll keep going.
Exactly. Keep it going on.
And it shouldn't bolt. It shouldn't bolt in the winter either. You know, it shouldn't go to flower so much. So you should get the leaf growing more. So what else?
Right, where are we moving on? We're on to the how to deal with seedy and perennial weeds. So I'm thinking that this question was talking about stuff like dock and maybe thistle and nettle. Maybe they were talking about plantain. I don't know.
Possibly.
I mean, a weed's definition of a weed: plant in the wrong place. There's no such thing as weed, really.
And I mean, some of them you can eat. I mean, this is something I need to look into more, because I don't want to recommend people go and eat something that's poisonous. But yeah, I'm actually going on a foraging course on Friday to learn more about which weeds you can eat. I'm quite excited about that.
You know, ground elder is a good example, because that's quite prolific in some gardens, and certainly gets people through the hungry gap. I certainly wouldn't want to eat too much of it, because it's not particularly tasty.
Okay, but you could bulk out something else with it.
My personal opinion, anyway. And ground elder is one of those ones that's pretty tricky, because it's not so much seedy as rooty, and it's got a root system like spaghetti, and it kind of like intermingles like that. And the best time to deal with ground elder, it's quite like peach grass in that sense.
Yeah.
It does flower, but it's quite easy to lock the flowers off the heads. It's more the root system, rhizome, that spreads like peach grass. The best time of year to deal with couch grass and also with ground elder is really kind of very early in the spring, kind of late winter and early spring, when there's nothing else in the beds, and you can give it a dig through,
rip it out,
and roots quite easily, because the soil's quite loose at that time of year. But for stuff like dock and dandelion, as you'll know, Susan, you know, the root systems are really, really long, you know, and even if you just leave a little tiny bit in, you know, that it will just grow back. I used a lot of horse manure on my new beds this year, and I found, you know, that the weed load was really heavy. So I had loads and loads in a meadow where I had no dock at all originally. There's no dock here whatsoever, and I had little mini docks just popping up everywhere, and nettle as well. Like, great. But, you know, just take them out when they're young. As soon as they appear, basically. That's when to get them out. Don't let them get established. That's
exactly. I mean, all I try to do really is try to just be vigilant and pull things out as you see them, as you say. Try to pull them out with the roots if you can. But the only other thing I would really add is that if something has gone to seed, I tend to try and get it, disturbing as few seeds as possible, and burn it. I know it's people say like
it's not true of dock, but things like thistle, willow herb, you know, with the seeds are all fluffy seeds that just like, I'll just put it out. Stick a bag over it before or a pillowcase, something like that. Before you
at the allotment, I've actually got some stuff that I've just left in bin bags because I haven't had the chance to deal with it. It's going to now then be soggy and I won't be able to burn it, but at least the seeds are not going off, because we've got ragwort coming up, which is obviously also poisonous, you know, and it had, unfortunately, I don't know how, because I saw it growing and then I just sort of left it, and then suddenly it was already in seed. You know, I just left it slightly too long, you know. But so that's now in bags, so I'll have to deal with it.
It is really good, and ragwort, if you can leave it to flower in a place where it's not being a problem, it's really good for, it's a particular butterfly.
Is it cinnabar moth?
Yes, cinnabar moth.
The stripy. They're pretty, aren't they?
Beautiful little things.
And I think they only live on ragwort, I think, don't they?
I think so. And because, like, you know, people are so obsessed with removing ragwort, especially from the countryside where it's damaging livestock.
Whereas obviously we're not going to have any livestock in the allotment, so I suppose it probably doesn't really matter so much. But I didn't want to be the person who spread ragwort to all the other plots, you know what I mean? Like,
but you have got small children as well, though.
Well, exactly, I know. And I mean, I recently discovered an ornamental plant which is growing wild in my allotment, and I didn't recognize it at all. I've never seen it, and it's called oh God, what the hell's it called? Something obligata, Euphoria obligata.
Nice.
I'd never seen it, but my friend managed to find out what it was, and apparently a single seed of that particular plant can kill a child. I was like, oh, we'd best get rid of that. Because I thought it's really pretty. I mean, it's actually an ornamental plant. It's an escaped ornamental. Tons of it. So I'm having to pull, like, and now I recognize it. I'm pulling it out when it's tiny, but it's just coming up and coming up, you know. But before we were leaving it because in bits where we went, it looks like it's pretty. But yeah, so yeah, know your weeds and don't eat the wrong one.
Luckily, there's not many plants like that. But I'll tell you, wait, just briefly on the burning or sort of suffocating. So I don't do this, but my friend Lorraine, who lives here with us at the mill, with all her kind of perennial rooty seedy weeds, she puts them all into a big massive like IBC tank and drowns them. And then leaves them for ages and ages, a bit like making a comfrey tea, because there's still contain nutrients. So you can still get a fertilizer tea out of it that doesn't contain anything.
And then that rots the seed, presumably, so they're not viable. Exactly.
So you can actually make a nutritious fertilizer out of it. But yeah, it takes a bit longer. It's not as good as comfrey and seaweed and so forth. But,
I mean, I suppose theoretically, if your compost heats up enough, it should kill any seeds, shouldn't it? But I'm never convinced mine is heating up enough for that, you know?
No, I wouldn't guarantee that that's the case. And I would never put rooty weedy perennials on a compost heap for that reason. Okay, moving on. So this is where I get to excitingly share my screen. So this next question is about aubergines, or as somebody called them in the question, eggplant. And this is how to pollinate your aubergines. So here we go. Here is a picture of some aubergine flowers in my polytunnel, and hopefully you can make out the bee that is scooting towards it. It's just coming into land. I had another one of a close-up of that's the same bee actually pollinating in pollination mode, but I couldn't find that one. But I'm quite liking this one. It's like bee when it comes. So I mentioned earlier attracting pollinators into your if you've got a polytunnel or a greenhouse and you're growing aubergines, then attracting pollinators in. Now, it's specifically as bumblebees that you want in your greenhouse or polytunnel, because they do all the work on the runner beans and the tomatoes and the aubergines and the cucumbers and everything else. It's bumblebees specifically. And in this case, I'm not very good with bumblebee species, but it's the little ginger fellas that work really hard. I was just in admiration of this guy. That's why I took so many pictures of it. Just going in and out of all the flowers, and you can almost hear how hard work it is, because it's like you can see the tongue going in. It was you're just gorgeous. I just love you. So thank you to the bees, and I planted Phacelia, and I've planted Calendula, and I've planted other kind of bee attracting plants in the polytunnel that's drawn them in, and they've kind of gone, oh, Phacelia, oh, look at everything else, how tasty.
So you just leave it open? You basically just leave the doors open or something to attract them in, do you? Is that?
Yeah, just during the day. Yeah, the doors are open, windows are open during the day. Yes.
Yeah.
If you do not have a lot of pollinators around, and if you're not getting a lot of visits from bumblebees, then it's a paintbrush job basically.
Yeah.
So you can get a very soft paintbrush. It mustn't be a very tiny one as well. It's in the polytunnel actually. I should have brought it. Oops, as a prop. But yeah, you can get a very soft brush, and you see the little the sort of yellow bits right in the middle.
Yeah.
So what the bee does is gets their tongue right in amongst the kind of yellow section in the middle, which is where the stamen and the stigma are, And you basically emulate that with a very soft brush. So you brush around that, and then you'd go to another plant and you brush around it. You brush around the same and the stigma in there as well. And you do that with at least like 4 different flowers. Now, with aubergines, you can use the same plants, so you don't need 2 separate plants.
Okay. So they're self-fertile. Yeah.
Self-fertilizing, but not self-pollinating. So
right. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite good to have a few more plants than just
probably. Yeah.
But if you have only got one, and I noticed the other day that Lidl was selling them, for example, so I kind of imagining that some people have kind of got them and taken them home.
Yeah, and then just
yeah.
I do.
And you're never going to get a bumblebee in your living room, basically.
I know.
Well,
I do the paintbrush thing with tomatoes if I'm growing them on the windowsill, actually. I know you can sort of shake them a bit as well, but I actually do that with that. Though I was once at a massive tomato farm in Norway, you know, as you do, and obviously with it being Norway, it's all tomatoes under glass, huge glass houses, right? And it was really interesting. It's a friend's uncle's farm, and it was fascinating actually. But what they did was they bought boxes of bees, like literally cardboard boxes of bees, and then released them into the thing. Which I thought, you know, I was like, oh great. But I thought after, I wonder what happened to those bees, because they don't have a hive or anything. So I don't know if
were they bumblebees or honeybees?
I don't know. I don't know. I assume they were bumblebees, but I don't know. But there were these like
bumblebees will go and find somewhere to live. I think that they don't live in hives anyway. They sort of live in,
okay. So then are they solitary?
Yeah,
usually solitary. Okay. So that makes more sense then. Maybe that was all that was happening. It was like after I was like, oh, I wonder if there's some like disposable bees. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that does happen in the States, in big orchards in the States, which rely on honeybees for pollination.
Right. Okay.
And they bring in, you know, boxes and boxes and boxes of honeybees, and a lot of them will perish, and they're just used as machine pollinators, really.
Yeah.
Bit of a shame.
Yeah. I know. Okay.
All right, moving on.
Right.
So the next question is about strawberries. This is a nice straightforward one.
Oh yeah.
About the strawberries. How to propagate strawberries and replenish plants. What do you think, students? Is it?
I mean, I'm quite sort of low maintenance in my general approach to everything. So I have one of my mini raised beds that's just full of strawberry plants. I have no idea what variety they are. Some of them seem to flower in the summer. Some of them seem to, produce fruit in the summer. Some are more autumn, and they're just ripening now. So it's obviously a mixture. God knows what. And basically, all I do is I leave them with a net around to stop cats and stuff getting in, and the birds. And once they've all stopped flowering and fruiting, I go in and I cut off any dead bits. And if it's looking too full, I would take out a few plants. And I would try and encourage like the runners that come off them to kind of bed down into the soil in any gaps kind of thing. So I might move the runners around, but that's about it. And I have given plants away in the past when I've had too many, because I think that they'll stop being as productive as they get older. But if somebody wants to like start a strawberry patch, you can start it with pretty much anything. I mean, they grow really well in Scotland. Do you know what I mean? Like we have good growing conditions for soft fruit generally. So that's all I do. I don't know if there's anything else I should do.
That is very low maintenance. I mean, personally, I would give them a little bit more space than that. And certainly in almost every community garden that I've ever worked in Glasgow, it's a main activity in the kind of autumn and early spring. So when the mother plant sends out runners in different directions, they can send out loads, and then they'll create more babies and more babies again. So I mean, I think it's too good an opportunity not to create more plants for other people. So quite often, I mean, yes, you can just, as you say, help it to bed down and put roots down in any gaps that you might possibly have. But you shouldn't feel shy about snipping it off either side of the plant and putting it into a wee pot and letting it establish in a pot. Those
and then you can give people a new one, I suppose, rather than me giving them the old ones.
But, the other thing is that it's good practice to move your strawberry patch every 3 to 5 years or so. This is partly because of nutrients, because they've been taking the nutrients out of the ground, and it's really hard to kind of add in for years when you've got a sort of a fixed plant in one place. yeah, it's a good practice to kind of move your strawberry patch into probably another raised bed.
Yeah, I'll have to do that at some point.
3, 5 years. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I was going to say mine were moved 2 years ago, I think, because initially I rather stupidly had them growing in the grass. I mean, it wasn't the grass originally. Originally, it was a border. I had a strawberry border. But of course, then the grass grew into the border and the strawberries grew into the grass. So it all got a bit wild. I mean, I was still getting some strawberries off them, but obviously the slugs in the grass were even worse than in a bed. You know what I mean? So I moved them a couple of years ago. But so I suppose I'll have, but actually I think it would be good to move them again at some point. So I'll have to remember to do that. I'll put it in my calendar for 3 years' time.
Yeah. But you can just use the same, but there's the runners to create a new patch. You don't have to create new strawberries. And,
yeah.
Have you ever tried to grow strawberries from seed?
I actually did have a packet of wild strawberry seeds, and I scattered them in amongst the strawberries. Because, so again, I have no idea what I actually have growing. I don't think the wild ones did very well, though, because wild strawberries are smaller, aren't they? And I did have some that were definitely wild strawberries. I can't see any anymore, so I think they've been outcompeted by the bigger cultivated ones.
I pretty much only grow wild strawberries.
Do you? Okay.
And in fact, we pretty much only grow white alpine strawberries.
So okay.
They're only about tiny. They get to about that big, maximum that size, and they're white. So
interesting.
Because they're white before they ripen as well. It can be a little bit difficult to tell exactly when they are ripe. But and they're just so sweet. They're so sweet and so tasty. And last year, when I was working at Baltic Street Adventure Playground, we were doing the growing project with the kids there, and much dismay of the staff. Actually, the staff were quite like, "Oh, these aren't proper strawberries." But basically, I'd only put in alpines, and I think for the kids, it was kind of quite exciting because with their wild strawberries, alpine strawberries, like they're actually much more productive. You get
a lot more fruit off them.
And for a longer season. So you don't just kind of get a strawberry and they're done. You get it for the whole season, all the way through. So the kids coming in each week and they'd be like rummaging through the leaves and looking for like tiny little red gems in the green. Whereas the staff were just like, they're not proper strawberries.
But, I mean, do you know what? You need a big strawberry for the strawberry taste, do you? Do you know what I mean? Like, you only really need a bite of strawberry to feel like you ate strawberry.
Couldn't make jam out of them. That was the main concern. It's just like, well, they're still much more fun for the kids.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. Yeah. I should probably.
Moving on. We had the obvious question: what to do in autumn and winter? So some of this we've already covered with kind of green manures and kind of crops. So that kind of thing, but obviously we're moving into September and October just now. So what would you suggest moving into the season?
Other than the seasonal sowing of seeds and so on? I mean, I suppose there's a few things that I have would plant not directly into the ground, but this is like spring cabbage seeds that you could still plant that to be grown in pots and then potted on, but away from seeding things, what I would do is I would concentrate on trying to store your food. So you'll be digging up crops at the moment and you need to then deal with it so you can keep it. So I've been drying onions, drying out my potatoes so I can store them, these kinds of things, cutting herbs, herbs that have come to the end of the growing season, cut them and dry them and so on. So, and you were talking about chutneys and stuff, weren't you? So you can, some things you might want to pickle. So if you've got loads of brassica leaves, you could make sauerkraut. I had some pickled cucumber the other day that was really nice. It was a really simple method. It was just basically cucumbers with some seasoning and a bit of vinegar in the jar, and then just leave it, and it'll keep for a while. You know what I mean? And it's sort of with the taste changes and so on. So looking at ways to store your bounty at the moment so that you've got it for later in the year.
If you're fortunate enough to have apple trees around you as well, and of course we're moving into apple season just at the moment, so they'll be falling from the trees right now as wind falls. So you can gather those up from the ground rather than pick them off the tree, and that's good for kind of making. Well, I'm making some courgettes, well, it's kind of marrows now, really. Marrow and apple chutney a bit later on today, using apples that I gathered.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really nice.
I was in Glasgow last week, as you know, and I went to visit my old friends in Queen's Park. On the Saturday night, where there's the orchard up by the flagpole. There's about 15 beautiful trees up there, and then there's the lower orchard on the north slopes above the ponds.
Yeah,
and there's about 20-25 apple trees there, and we had the wassail that we organised earlier this year. Well, I mean, obviously we've had good weather as well for apple season, but I'd like to think the wassail helped a little bit,
of course,
because they're so productive. The tree is so productive. So if you live on the south side of Glasgow, then go and have a look. Gather up the windfalls as they fall on the ground, and as we move through September into October, then you can start harvesting them. Don't take them off too early. And they're good for eating, but they're also going to be good for storing, and they're also going to be good for cooking with. They're really versatile creatures. Old apples.
And I mean,
the other thing that you can be doing September, October, and into November as well is things like perennial root divisions. So. You can also do this in the spring. There's no rush to do this. But
would you do that with things like rhubarb now?
You can do it with rhubarb. You can do it with stuff like marjoram.
Herbs and stuff. Yeah,
with the herbs, with thyme, with lemon balm. Not right now. That's just kind of moving on a little bit into
bit later when the stuff is less productive. Yeah,
exactly. When the foliage starts to die back. And move them and you can do it with herbs and sort of, but also you can do it with kind of perennial flowers like geraniums, the meadow cranes, the purple pink ones.
I inherited a rhubarb bed at my allotment. Actually, it's great. It's been really productive, but I think it's too much for the space. So I think I'm gonna dig it up and divide the crowns actually and bring some home. So because I've only got a sort of weak rhubarb in the garden, so it'd be quite nice to kind of establish a bed here as well, so that's a good thing to do actually when they need to start dying back. When
it starts dying back, and so that's like I said, September, well more like October, and maybe slightly into November. And it can wait until spring, but you've got to do it early enough before everything starts growing and really better than we get. And the other thing, I'm sorry, I know you've got some other stuff.
That's okay. But
the other thing that I kind of thought of was sort of semi-hardwood cuttings from fruit bushes.
Okay.
So either this side of the winter, October, November, or again in spring, March, April, at the very latest, you should be pruning your fruit bushes. So black currants, red currants, gooseberries, they should all be taking a few bits off, and I'll do a video on that later on in this to actually practically demonstrate it. So which bits to take off and which bits you don't. Taking cuttings is so easy because all you're going to cut bits off anyway. And with the bits that you cut off, you just stick them in some compost, stick them in some soil, and they will just grow. I took about 200 blackcurrant cuttings, I think, before I left Glasgow from my fruit bushes in my back garden. And they've all done amazingly well. It's
so nice, like particularly if you have like a tree or a bush that you're particularly sort of fond of. It's so nice to be able to give that same tree to other people. You know what I mean? Or that same plant. Like, I think that's quite nice. Particularly if you know it's one that grows well, kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. It's a lovely fruit that you get off it and everything else as well. You had some other ideas as well, didn't you?
Well, I mean, the only other things I was really going to add was that I guess in autumn you can plant trees and bushes as well if you're wanting to do that, like hazel, whatever. That I guess autumn tends to be the time for planting of trees, doesn't it? If you are wanting to put any in. And the only other thing I had that I particularly thought of was it's a good opportunity to like fix fences and things like that. Like, so particularly if like when foliage has died back, you can get into areas more. So like if you've got other kind of structural repairs to do, you know what I mean? The time to do it is now when you have less of the other stuff to do, I suppose, isn't it? Sharpen your tools, these kinds of things.
General maintenance that you wouldn't
exactly. Bonfires, have a bonfire.
And don't forget to mulch everything. Mulch.
Exactly. So there's actually tons to do, to be honest. You don't really get a break, really.
There is, no. It does calm down a little bit, but you don't really get much. It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few questions left. So the next one is around cucumbers. And the question was, cucumbers, why do they go yellow and wither? So I've got some prolific cucumber vines in my polytunnel, producing up to picking maybe at least a couple a day, and at least 10 to 12 going out in the veg boxes each week. Cucumbers are great to grow, but you do need to make sure that you give them plenty of air and light. And it's the same with any fruiting plant, basically. So it's the same with pruning your fruit bushes or your apple trees. It's the same with beans as well, actually. You want to reduce humidity, reduce air moisture around the plants, and give them plenty of air and light. Typically speaking, if your cucumbers are if they're going yellow and withering, so we didn't get sent a picture with this, but I'm assuming they're not getting much bigger than that, because I've got some that are doing that, and I know why. It's because it's too damp and too moist, and there's not enough airflow around the plant. So I'm literally getting my secateurs every day, going sweeping through the polytunnel and snipping leaves off.
I think I need to do that with my courgettes, actually.
Sniffing the leaves off, and I think people are a little bit afraid to do that. It's the same with cucumbers and courgettes and beans and tomatoes. Don't be afraid to cut the leaves off, because if you don't, you're going to create a humid atmosphere, which will just lead to rotting, basically.
Is that basically because things like courgettes and cucumbers and stuff, they would grow better in a drier, more like Mediterranean type climate? Is that sort of the issue that we have, really, is that it's a little bit cool and damp compared to what the plant would really like? Is that?
Yeah. It is a problem, because especially in Scotland as well, so the air temperature outside is it's a lot warmer inside than it is outside. Outside the polytunnel, and that creates additional condensation.
Of course.
So we're kind of creating this like almost rainforest-like environment, and then we have to control
really what the plant wants. But
they actually grow much better outdoors in the Mediterranean, where it's not so humid, it's much drier.
Well, I'm going to go and cut some leaves off my courgettes today, because I've been having that, the rot at the top, the rot where the flower. I've been taking flowers off, but it's still happening. I think I probably just need to thin it out more to let more.
They'll keep going back, and I don't know what variety of courgettes you're growing, but you can.
They were actually also an F1 hybrid. They're yellow. I'd never tried yellow ones before. I'm not having much success at all, to be honest.
Okay. But even with the F1 hybrids.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah. I can't remember what specific type they were. It was basically, I just I left it a little bit late to buy the seeds for the courgettes, and there wasn't much available, so that was what I ended up with, basically. But I don't know, not doing well.
But you can eat. So if you're cutting the leaves off and you're cutting off the big long stems, you can eat the stems.
Can you? So, did you fry them or something?
Yeah, I fry them. Yeah, stir fry or whatever.
I didn't know that the stems were edible. That's really good to know.
Not the leaves. Don't bother with the leaves. Cut the leaves off. But the stems, you can eat those. You should cut them into small pieces.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better about cutting them off.
Yeah, they're tasty. They're pretty tasty.
I knew the flowers, but I'd never heard of anyone eating the stems, so that's interesting. Okay, cool. I'll try that today.
Do. I've got some just over there, actually. So you mentioned F1 hybrids there, and so that kind of leads on to the next question, which was around getting cauliflowers or Romanescos to flower. So, okay, this was the question: how do I get my Romanescos and cauliflowers to flower? But what I'm assuming was actually meant was how do I get them to form a head? Because if you're waiting for them to flower, then they've gone too far. That's right, isn't it? So if they're flowering, then basically they're going to seed.
It's the same as bolting, effectively, isn't it?
So we're not sure, because this question was on Facebook. But what we actually think is meant by this question is you want them to form a head like that. Now, I mentioned F1 hybrids because I'm growing F1 hybrids cauliflowers this year. F1 hybrids are a sort of genetically they're bred. They're sort of bred under fairly kind of strict conditions. You take two different parent plants with two specific genetic traits, and you cross them together to create a plant that is maybe pest resistant or is good for productivity. Is kind of grows better in certain climates and so forth. So it's not genetic engineering, but it is genetic selection. And it's frowned upon by some growers, mostly because it's impossible to keep the seeds. and for the seeds to come true. So I'm being pragmatic. I'm not going to save the seeds of my cauliflowers. I'm going to eat the cauliflowers. So and also, cauliflowers are notoriously tricksy. And the thing is about cauliflowers, you have to treat them pretty well from the get-go. So you've got to handle those babies way back in the spring when you sowed the seeds in March and April, and they grow into small plants, and you've got to handle those with care. You've got to give them lots of love, and you've got to make sure that they've got enough nourishment. They're quite fussy, and they like a slow feed, basically. And then when you plant them out into June, you've got to make sure that the bed that you're planting them into is well prepared, and the soil is quite rich, and they've got plenty to eat to eat. And they really like a slow release nitrogen. So they don't want loads of manure thrown at them. They want something nice and slow, like comfrey. So digging in comfrey underneath them would be a good thing to do. Yeah, slow release nitrogen, and that keeps them going throughout the season. And by this point, right now, they should be forming nice little heads that should be getting into sort of fairly largish heads. And that's really the secret. So it's impossible really to say at this point what you can and cannot do to get them to form a head. The trick with cauliflowers is to treat them really well all throughout the season.
So go back in time, basically.
Yes. Yeah. Have you got a time machine? That's the question. That's the question.
Yeah. However, I suppose even if they don't form heads or they're like really small, you can still use all the green leaves, though, can't you?
That's
like you can use them as cooking greens. So it's not a total waste.
No.
It's just disappointing if they haven't headed, kind of thing. Yeah. I've never had any luck with cauliflowers, but as I was saying to Abby earlier, the slugs just get into mine. So I've managed to grow heads, not huge ones, but heads nonetheless. And then I'll look at it a couple of days later, and there's like holes and slugs buried in it, and it's just like,
so annoying. Bloody slugs. Yeah,
I know.
You need to chuck them further away.
I know, yeah.
So that's the beginning.
I need to get some chickens. I actually want to get some chickens because then they might eat, at the very least, eat slug eggs if they find them. But then they'd also eat my vegetables.
Ducks are good as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some ducks are kind of like a bit politer and don't eat your greens so much.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I think we're on to our last question, by the way, which is one that my mum sent in. And she sent in a picture, so I'm just going to share the screen. Here we go. Da, 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 da. Where is it? Mum's tomato. Here it is. There's my mum's tomato. So she sent me this picture over Facebook, and she said, "What's wrong with my tomato?" And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I'll use that as a question on Gardener's Question Time. That was the Gardener's Question Time that we meant to have the other day, and we just ended up talking about seaweed for an hour. So sorry, Mum, this is a bit late. But nonetheless, I can tell you, and anybody else who's having similar tomato problems, that what you have there is a fungal infection. Okay, so it's probably, so my mum lives in South Wales, and she's growing her tomatoes outside. And probably what's happening is that they're just getting a bit too wet, and again, it's the humidity. So I don't know. I haven't spoken to her about it in enough detail. I don't know whether she's cutting the leaves off, and I think it's still need to do that, even if they're outside in South Wales. And I think creating that air and light around the fruit, so that it's got plenty of time to kind of get the space it needs to ripen up. Otherwise, these fungal infections are going to come in, and they'll spread really quickly throughout the other plants as well. So yeah, removing the infected looking fruits pretty fast, and creating more air and light around them. So you're sort of doing away with the conditions that fungal infections and other kinds of diseases need to thrive. That's just about it, really. So here we go. Stop the share of the tomato. There we go. Hopefully that's been helpful, Mum. Do we have any other things you want to go over really quickly just now, Susan? I think we've covered 10 questions. I think it's pretty impressive, and
nothing was jumping out at me. But I'm just having a quick look at the video ideas list, just in case there's anything we could quickly chat about. But
that has been an hour, though. I think we've done pretty well.
I mean, we probably it's probably long enough, isn't it? Yeah, no, I don't know. I think we covered them pretty thoroughly. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So I guess
think
it just remains to say, you know, keep the ideas coming in, folks.
Yeah.
If any questions that you want us to specifically address, whether it's making a video about it or whether it's doing a sort of, you know, episode like this where we're just chatting about gardening for an hour.
And I think, actually, I tell you, the only thing I could specifically think to add, actually, is just because I'm kind of aware that a lot of people have started growing stuff this year because of lockdown and stuff, maybe having never really done it before. And I've had a few people like ask me, like, you know, why is, you know, like just very general questions. Why has this not worked? Why is this? And I keep seeing like there's a lot of trial and error in gardening, isn't there? Because even if somebody who's, you know, relatively experienced or very experienced like Abby says this is what I do, they are talking about the specific setup that they are in, aren't they, with the specific type of soil and the specific type of weather and the specific seeds. And it is just a bit of a question sometimes of learning what works in the space you have, isn't it? And if it doesn't work, try it differently next year, you know what I mean? And to not be put off, I suppose.
Do not be disheartened.
You're quite right. It's like, I mean, you see like these, like at the allotment that I'm at, these old men who are like in their 80s and stuff, and like they've probably been doing it since they were like in their 30s or even younger, you know what I mean? And it takes a long time to learn. Like, you know,
they've had their plots for decades. They've had plenty of time to enrich. Well, the thing actually, you know, it comes back to something that we were talking about earlier, the soil. That is, you know, so important to make sure that you're starting. Have you just dribbled coffee over yourself? Well, make sure that you are sorting your soil out, and we're coming towards the end of the growing season just now. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting towards the end of the growing season. So when you start taking your plants out and things are finishing, then, you know, don't waste time in getting some well rotted manure or well rotted compost, or sowing your green manures, or getting as much comfrey leaf from somewhere as you can possibly muster,
chicken poo and stuff,
spreading that. You know, there's so many ways to enrich your soil. And the better you treat the soil, the more enriched it is, the more nutrients it's got going through it, the better your crops will be next year. You can do it as you go along, but we said it earlier, look after the soils, and the soils will look after the plants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so important. Okay, all right. Well, Susan, it's been lovely to chat to you.
Yeah, very nice to chat to you too.
And it's been lovely to, hopefully our comms and video expert Emrys will sort this video out and make it perfect. And as we said, like the page, follow us on Facebook, donate to our PayPal, etc., and keep telling us what you want to know about gardening. All right, I'm just going to end the broadcast. So thanks everybody out there, and bye-bye.
Bye.